A Course in
What?
with Cynthia Morgan.
Hey, course friends. Welcome to A Course in What? I'm Cynthia Morgan, and this is a podcast in which I read and discuss the text of A Course in Miracles. And we are on episode number 16. Thank you for joining me today. And I'm recording this on July 14th, which happens to be Helen Schucman's birthday. She would have been 105 today. And we're all so grateful to her for her service in this lifetime. And so let's all remember her today and hope that she is journeying peacefully wherever she is. So I thought that I would do something a little different this week and add an audio excerpt from my book, You're Already Hypnotized, A Guide to Waking Up, for this episode. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with the book, it combines my work as a hypnotherapist with A Course in Miracles principles. And since we've talked about bad habits in the last few sections and the last podcast episodes, and one listener even wrote in that she was confused about how to approach changing a bad habit of hers, I thought I'd add the chapter titled Bad Habits to this podcast. And you'll find that we've already discussed some of these ideas that are in the book, and some of them we haven't. It's right in alignment with what we've been reading and talking about. And for those Course in Miracles purists who only want to read A Course in Miracles, I'm sorry, you can skip this podcast this week. But you might find something interesting and helpful in this information today. And if you don't have a bad habit, that's okay. I elaborate on the metaphysics of the Course, especially the idea of guilt in the mind in this chapter. So you see, this podcast is a collaborative venture, just like the Course is between Helen and Bill. This podcast is a collaborative venture because it's the product of us joining as well. It will bend and mold according to you, the listener, and your questions and comments, and me. And you can see that in the last few podcast episodes. So I hope that you find this audio helpful. And next week we'll resume with the text. And by the way, at the end of the reading, there are tips for helping you with your bad habit. All right, so here it is.
Chapter 3, Bad Habits. Holy child of God, when will you learn that only holiness can content you and give you peace? A Course in Miracles. The conscious mind can lie, but the body can't. It is the outward manifestation of our subconscious thoughts. I sometimes look to my client's body to determine her thoughts. The subconscious holds what we believe to be true, and those personal truths show up emotionally, psychologically, and physically. What we subconsciously believe literally makes us weak or strong, sick or healthy. Muscle testing or applied kinesiology can be used to determine whether a client's subconscious thoughts are in agreement with her conscious thoughts. If a client says she wants to quit a bad habit, for example, muscle testing can show whether she means it, not just consciously, but subconsciously. If a client says she wants to stop drinking alcohol, I could then test that statement by asking her to extend her arm and say, "I want to stop drinking alcohol," and then resist me as I press down on her arm. If she can hold up her arm, the statement is true. She wants to stop drinking. But if her strength is weak and her arm easily goes down, the statement is subconsciously false. She doesn't want to stop drinking. Negative thoughts are toxic to the mind and body. We think we've escaped our worst beliefs through repression or a false sense of forgiveness, but those thoughts come out swinging in depression, anger, low self-esteem, sickness, and bad habits. Next to my hypnosis chair, I keep a waste paper basket in case a client throws up. The natural dynamic of the mind is to project what's in it. Negative thoughts always seek expression because they are too burdensome for the mind. When it comes to tackling a bad habit, I usually find that a client's subconscious mind is not in alignment with their conscious mind. They say they want to quit their bad habit, but their muscles go weak when I test them. The good news is that the subconscious mind can be aligned with the conscious mind by going within and finding the desire to be free of the bad habit while repeating a positive statement such as, "I want to stop smoking." You may remember that conscious mind repetition programs the subconscious. Once the subconscious is aligned with the conscious mind, healing becomes easier. Why? Because the subconscious always wins over the conscious mind. Belief trumps effort. If the subconscious mind is not on board, it will sabotage our best attempts and willpower, or it will act out in other adverse ways, such as producing withdrawal symptoms. The reason we don't quit our bad habits even though we want to is because our subconscious thinks we're better off with them. This is called a negative payoff. Underlying every bad habit is a negative payoff. Even though the habit may be destroying us at worst or annoying at best, subconsciously we think it's serving us, otherwise we wouldn't indulge in it. The bad habit is often the only way our subconscious believes it can get its deeper needs met. From what I've uncovered with clients, the biggest negative payoff is protection. The maladaptive behavior becomes a defense mechanism, protecting us from whatever it is we fear: getting hurt, succeeding, failing, normalcy, conflict, feeling our feelings, being seen in a certain way, or being held responsible. Consciously, taking away the bad habit doesn't cure the subconscious beliefs. We might stop a particular behavior, but we start another one or pick it up again later. Our subconscious believes the habit gives us something of value, and though we easily let go of what we no longer want or need, we cling to what we value, even if it's hurting us. Giving up an unwanted habit then requires a change of value, which is nothing more than a change in perception about what the habit is for. If a smoker thinks cigarettes are her best friend, she's not going to give them up. But if through hypnosis I take away that value by changing her subconscious mind, then what she wants to give up is valueless and therefore easier to relinquish. What a smoker or drinker, nail-biter, overeater, drug user, etc. thinks she gets from her bad habit takes precedence over its harmful effects. Continuing with our smoker example, all smokers know it's bad for them. Respiratory infections, emphysema, lung cancer, heart attacks, wrinkles, impotence, and death don't faze them because they value smoking, and even their cars more than they value their body. Most smokers hold their cigarettes outside of their car window while driving for fear of the smoke dirtying their interior, yet they inhale it into their lungs. It doesn't make sense. You know you're asleep when you value a piece of metal more than your life. It takes some reorganizing of the subconscious in order for smokers to see their bad habit from a right-minded perspective. My job is to help them understand that smoking cigarettes offers only an illusion of value. In and of itself, a cigarette has no value. Our mind assigns meaning to these things, and it's that meaning that keeps us stuck, not the behavior or the thing itself. All of the smokers I've worked with say smoking relaxes them, but that's just a lie they tell themselves to justify the addiction. They're not questioning the reality of the problem. Cigarettes, like any unwanted habit, do not provide relaxation. On the contrary, they cause agitation in the body through the withdrawal of the drug, toxic chemicals, and nicotine. The perceived relaxation from a drag on a cigarette is simply the rush of nicotine back into the system. Is a heroin addict truly relaxing with each hit? Is a sex addict genuinely relaxing with each encounter? They might think they are, and it feels that way for a moment. There is a rise of dopamine, the neurotransmitter responsible for pleasure in their brain, which makes them feel good. But the truth is, they are simply feeding a craving that is in large part causing their anxiety in the first place. And this is true with all bad habits. They feed anxiety. They cannot allay anxiety. It always comes back. Bad habits and anxiety go hand in hand. If you have a bad habit, you have fear. Healing and peace come from a different part of your mind. When you are deeply relaxed, as in a hypnotic state or asleep, The need to pull out your hair or drink or smoke disappears. Your body is in the parasympathetic relaxation mode, not the sympathetic fight or flight response that generates cravings, and your mind has moved away from the belief or idea that you are a body, or more specifically, an addict. Everyone is looking for peace. Many of us are just looking in the wrong place. Often the only time a smoker relaxes and takes a deep breath is while inhaling a cigarette. Thus she mistakenly attributes the relaxation to the cigarette. On the bodily level, the cigarette does placate the nicotine addiction, but the real relief comes from the decision to take a break, retreat from the craziness of the world, breathe deeply, and be present. This is what we crave, a respite from our mistaken ideas, a break from the insanity of our own ego and the world. We're just terribly confused about how to get that. And once we're confused, we're vulnerable to the ego's false programming. I use the terms interchangeably, but there is a subtle difference between bad habits and addictions. Bad habits are often unconscious, like swearing or picking your cuticles. They are annoying, but they don't interfere with or ruin your life. Addiction, on the other hand, can be defined as a behavior that you know is having a detrimental effect on your life, your career, finances, health, well-being, or primary relationships, yet you continue to feed the craving. I believe that addiction and bad habits, though different in form, share the same underlying cause. Both are the results of bad decisions. They begin with a choice in the mind based on a valid need for love, peace, self-respect, comfort, attention, or whatever we feel is lacking. The idea that we don't have what we need or are not capable of fulfilling our need shows up in our behavior. Thus, the bad habit starts out as a coping mechanism, masking some emotional immaturity and perceived need, but it often ends up as an addiction. I do not believe that one addiction is harder to heal than another, because they are all the result of a decision made in the mind. I have seen clients struggle more to give up their morning cup of coffee than their daily pack of cigarettes. We are programmed to believe that there is a hierarchy of healing. Thus, our experience becomes a testament to that belief, even though it's not inherently true. Contrary to popular belief, addiction is not genetic. We can, however, come into this life with a predisposition to addiction. Everything in the physical world and in the body, including our DNA, is an effect, not a cause. Mind is the creator. Addiction can show up in our genes, but that doesn't mean it started there. We must think beyond the body and the conscious mind. Addiction is part of a greater life lesson. We choose a family or environment that best serves our life's plan, but our addictions are not our parents' fault. Sure, Dad's alcoholism could have contributed to your alcoholism, but rather than by passing on his addiction gene, it was the unintended programming of your subconscious that he did as your authority figure. Addiction is the coping mechanism you learned and the one he learned, and so on. We are programmed to believe that determinism is the rule, that we are controlled by our genetics. Although some scientific researchers have been quietly telling us differently for 40 years, we don't want to hear them. We can't change our skin color, but we can change much more than we once believed. In his book, The Biology of Belief, research scientist Dr. Bruce Lipton details his experiments that show that DNA responds to positive and negative thought. We have a hard time accepting that we can alter our DNA because we are hypnotized by the ego, whose goal is to keep us rooted in the body and a victim of what's beyond our control. In understanding addiction, it's helpful to examine how we got programmed into this pervasive victim consciousness underlying our bad habits and addictions. For that, we will turn to A Course in Miracles. Bad habits and addictions are not sins in the traditional Christian sense, in which sin is associated with doing something bad. Our only sin has been listening to the ego, which tells us that we are separate from God and therefore lacking. To sin, in Course terms, is to misperceive. Consequently, that sin of separation or misperception is responsible for all traditionally defined sins, violence, betrayal, greed, addiction, and so on. Those things are merely effects of our original sin, the original mistaken perception of a separation from God. We're not aware that this is why we have bad habits, but we are aware of a persistent feeling of emptiness resulting from separation. If we believe we are separate from God, we are bound to misperceive everything because we will be wrong about who we are, and as a result, we will be wrong about what we need and how to fulfill that need. Kenneth Wapnick has outlined the ego's unholy trinity, which is sin, guilt, and fear. Sin, a mistaken belief in separation, I've left God, leads to guilt. I've done something terribly wrong, which is followed by a fear of punishment. I will pay for this. The guilt-ridden always believe punishment is imminent. That's why we have an underlying feeling that we're about to be found out. Whose heart doesn't drop when a police officer pulls up behind them? The ego is always on guard. It knows it's just a matter of time before the jig is up, because only love is eternal. That fate is what makes the ego nervous. Eventually, we will all return home. Addiction is an attempt to anesthetize that guilt. Who wants to feel guilty or anxious or separate or whatever else we think is lacking in us stemming from guilt? But the addiction ultimately becomes a form of self-punishment for that guilt. The reason it feels so good to indulge in whatever it is we're addicted to, drinking, shopping, sex, is that in those moments we think we are free from guilt. The guilt comes back after we've indulged. During our indulgence, it feels good on some level, even if the addiction hurts us physically. The reason for this is because when we indulge, we unconsciously believe that we're free from punishment. Deep down, we believe that God won't punish us for being separate from Him because we're already in hell. In other words, we are already suffering. Addiction becomes a twisted get-out-of-jail-free card, as if God might say, John is already suffering, so I won't punish him and make him suffer more. Self-punishment becomes a form of innocence, and that's what all addicts are looking for, a reprieve from guilt and shame. But as we all know, our innocence is not found in the world. It's found in our connection with God. If I believe I have sinned, separated from God, I will feel guilty and fear punishment. There can be no fear without guilt, and no guilt without sin. Every fear can be traced back to guilt, and all guilt can be traced back to the belief in separation from God. It is that guilt and resultant fear in our unconscious mind that underlies all of our problems, both collectively and individually, including our addictions. Guilt and fear keep us asleep. If I begin with the idea that I am guilty, I will assume that innocence is outside of me. And who or what is outside of me? Other people. I attempt to steal their innocence by making them guilty. In my mind, if I blame you for my addiction, for example, then I am innocent. Blame feels good, even though the ego always seeks resolution outside of itself. A Course in Miracles warns us, ideas leave not their source. We feel a temporary sense of relief in playing the victim, but the guilt hasn't gone anywhere. Eventually, we will feel bad again and look to anesthetize the guilt in the bad habit. Each time we affix blame, we are attempting to prove to God that we are innocent and escape His punishment. Projection is a defense against a fearful God. Blaming another is incredibly tempting because we think we're absolved of guilt and won't have to suffer God's vengeful wrath. Someone else will. That's why we blame our parents. In this world, our parents represent God in our mind because they are our, quote, creators. We have only one real relationship, and that is to God. Consequently, we're constantly projecting our unconscious thoughts about that relationship onto others. If I feel abandoned by God, I will think others are abandoning me. If I feel undeserving of God's love, I will sabotage what's good in my life. Having parents who are addicts is a prime way for our ego to maintain its innocence. Who can blame us if mom and dad was addicted? She didn't have a good start in life. He was bound to fail with those genes. We all know that we use things to fill a void. We also know that void is basically a lack of love. Typically, most psychologists and hypnotherapists trace the void back to childhood, but ultimately, it's not about what our parents didn't give us, though that's a good place to start by forgiving our parents and releasing the past. The true void is an absence of God. That's why bad habits never bring lasting satisfaction. The ego's edict is seek and do not find. A bad habit is an attempt at a physical solution to a psycho-spiritual neurosis. When we decided long ago that we would live a life separate from God, we became unhappy. And we didn't know why, so we turned to the loudest voice in our mind, our ego, for a solution. That was our only mistake, and it's a mistake we keep making over and over again in the present moment. We continually go to the wrong teacher for help. The ego's answer is always to seek fulfillment through the body and in the world. Consequently, the more we listen to the ego, the further away from healing we move. We're still searching through sex, candy bars, wine, pot, or shoes, but the ego never tells us that our real addiction is to suffering, to our ego thought system. The cause of our pain is choosing against our real happiness. If you want to permanently change your behavior, you must go back to your mind and relinquish the value you have placed on the bad habit by listening to a different teacher. Ask God to use the mess your ego has made for His holy purposes. This puts you in your right mind where you can assess what needs to be done on the physical level. Today you are given the opportunity to live your life differently. The past and all of its mistakes are over. Every attempt at healing, no matter how small, has great strength behind it. The Holy Spirit will use the situation just as it is to bless your life rather than to hurt you. It's not easy. It can be scary to take that first step because your identity is wrapped up in who you were, not who you are. You have been doing the same thing for so long that you don't know who you would be without the behavior. But the truth is, you didn't know who you were in the first place. That's what led to the bad habit. Without a clear understanding that we are not victims and are not meant to suffer, that we are spiritual beings capable of making new choices and are stronger than any bad habit, we will continue to fall into the ego's trap. A Course in Miracles says we are not afraid of the crucifixion. We are afraid of the resurrection. We are more comfortable hurting ourselves than healing ourselves. Our real fear is of resurrecting in our own lives. We're afraid of who we might become. The Course tells us it is our power, not our weakness, that really terrifies us. No one would smoke, overeat, bite their nails, or abuse alcohol if they knew who they were, a well-loved, innocent child of God. Our diseased perception of ourselves leads to diseased behavior, diseased relationships, diseased bodies, and even death. The end of guilt and fear does not lie within the ego thought system. It lies on the other side of our mind. Bad habits are fear. Healing is love. When we follow the mellifluous voice of the Holy Spirit, we remember that only love is real. That shift in perception from fear to love is what A Course in Miracles calls a miracle. And miracles lead us home. Every moment you are standing at a crossroads with only two paths in front of you, love and fear. Your bad habit is a path of fear, and it will never lead you to fulfillment. It's an easy path. You could coast down it because you've been doing it for so long, but it is dark and lonely and full of sorrow, pain, failure, and death. It's a slippery slope into a wasted life. There is another path, however. That path leads to happiness and freedom, success and life. Each time you choose your bad habit, you are stepping onto the low road of fear, which goes nowhere. No one said the high road was easy. If it were, everyone would take it. It's a challenging uphill climb, but the view is beautiful. When you choose to forego your ego and thwart its bodily cravings, you come one step closer to God and to your own happiness. Your life is but a series of choices in each moment. Healing is in the present moment. It's not outside of you, and it's not in the future. It's the choice you make in this moment. Your bad habit is not what's making you unhappy. Your decision to avoid taking control of your life is what causes you to suffer. The high road is a path of integrity and authenticity. Addiction, on the other hand, is steeped in secrecy, deception, and lies. As the saying goes, the truth will set you free. Commit to a life of integrity. You deserve that. The real story, as opposed to the story you've been telling yourself that you are bad, is that you are very good. You have integrity in spades. You were created from the highest level of love. And that's what's been killing you. You haven't allowed yourself to be who God created you to be. You've been trying to be someone you are not, and then attacking yourself through punishing behaviors for that choice. This is why people in recovery are advised to stay away from potential triggers while they heal. Protect yourself while you relearn who you are. The dangerous part of succumbing to urges is the punitive message it feeds your mind. I am weak. This subconscious thought then infiltrates every aspect of your life. Each clean day is a triumph because it rewires your brain and teaches you that you are stronger than any habit and you are more than worthy of a life of happiness and love. If you turn on a light in a dark room, the darkness disappears. It's not necessary for God to come into this nightmare and take away your bad habits. God doesn't do anything in the world. God is love. The veil of darkness lifts and the light gets brighter when you have the willingness to take responsibility for what you have created and make another choice. A Course in Miracles says that it does not aim at teaching the meaning of love, for that is beyond what can be taught. It does aim, however, at removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. You can begin the journey of awakening by using those blocks in front of you, such as your bad habit, to learn that there is another way of living in the world. Your ego created your bad habit, but the Holy Spirit will use it to bring you home. It's not an uncommon story in recovery to hear that an addiction was the catalyst for one's awakening. That's certainly the highest purpose of any bad habit or addiction, but first and foremost, everyone who has ever relinquished a bad habit has done one thing. They have stopped the behavior. Often clients come to me with a list of issues to work on, like their career or depression or relationships. Then as a side note, they might mention that they smoke or that they drink a bottle of wine every night in order to fall asleep. I tell them that the best way I can help them achieve the kind of life they want is to stop the bad habit first. Lena is a perfect example. She is a beautiful, successful filmmaker who came to me because she was in her mid-30s, had a string of unfulfilling relationships, and desperately wanted to meet a nice man, get married, and have children. She also smoked. We worked on getting her to stop smoking, and when she did, everything shifted. Soon she fell in love with a man, they moved in together, adopted a dog, got married, and had twins. She often reminds me that in her first session I said, "Forget about all these other things you want and just focus on stopping your bad habit. If you do that, your life will change." Smoking had become an unconscious form of self-punishment for Lena. She was not only blocking the potential of her own life, but also keeping others from seeing her light and beauty. People don't want to be with someone who is self-destructing unless they too are sick. We want to be with healthy people who elevate us and see in us what we can't see within ourselves. When clients dehypnotize themselves and let go of their bad habits, they gain confidence and a newfound purpose. They awaken to their potential. I remember an email I received from one such client. 3 weeks into my new life as a non-smoker after a 15-year 2-pack-a-day habit, thanks to you and hypnotherapy, I'm just so happy. I've been feeling the invincibility of it all. Like if I can do this, what can't I do? And he's still smoke-free 2 years later, with an acting career that has taken off since giving up his bad habit. Suppression of self leads to addiction. Expression of self leads to liberation and greater success in all areas of life. The reason people's lives change when they stop a bad habit is not necessarily because they stop the behavior. It's because they stop punishing themselves with the habit. When you stop punishing yourself, you naturally attract greater opportunities and healthier people because you are vibrating at a higher level of consciousness. Generally speaking, you don't find enlightened folks who are drunks or who bite their nails. There is no guilt and conflict of mind showing up in their behavior. They experience life from their superconscious, which seeks nothing but to express the love within. They are joyful and calm because they know who they are, innocent children of God. You can't know your higher self and indulge in bad habits because all unwanted habits begin with the belief that you are a body, and you are not your body or your behavior. Daily disciplined spiritual practice can heal unwanted habits because it heals your misperceptions. Addiction is a problem of mistaken identity. Therefore, stopping that behavior is the perfect place to begin your journey of awakening. It is relearning who you are. When you stop hurting yourself, you let the light in. Your bad habit is merely teaching you the important lesson that everyone must learn. What you seek is within. As St. Francis of Assisi said, what we are looking for is what is looking. You are here to wake up to the truth that nothing in this world holds power over your holy mind. You can say something as simple as, I invite my higher self into this relationship I have with alcohol. You can't be in the mind of God and your ego at the same time. By remembering your right mind, you naturally relinquish guilt. Keep inviting a higher source into your mind to help you see things differently. Eventually, the ego will get edged out. Tip 3. Use the rubber band trick. Habits can be unconscious habituated responses triggered by stress stimuli. Healing requires being conscious. Put a rubber band on your wrist and snap it each time you are tempted by the unwanted habit. This helps snap you out of your unconscious behavior. Continue doing this or use something else to distract yourself for 30 days, which is the length of time it takes to replace an old habit with a new one. Tip 4. Notice stop signs. Stop signs are everywhere, and we can use them for purposes other than stopping our cars. How about stopping unwanted behaviors or thought patterns? Stop signs can be great reminders to change. You can see stop as standing for shift to other perception. Each time you see a stop sign, you can say, I can stop, and insert your bad habit. Tip 5. Use an alternate activity. If you are addicted to internet gambling, for instance, put A Course in Miracles by your computer, and when you have an urge to go online to gamble, open the book and read a section or do a lesson. Or have the daily reprogramming statements, Bad Habits, from the workbook at the back of this book with you at all times to distract your mind with a healthier thought. Eventually, you will hardwire your brain to desire a different outcome to the cravings. I heard about a man who attempted to heal his internet pornography addiction by searching for ways to heal his addiction every time he went online with a craving to search for porn. But you could use anything healthy, like walking your dog or drinking a glass of water, as an alternate activity. Tip 6. Delay yourself. Challenge yourself to resist the habit for as long as you can. Delay it for a few minutes at first, then work up to an hour, and then perhaps a couple of hours. Keep pushing yourself to delay for longer periods of time, which will build your strength. Tip 7. Label your feelings. Notice what you're feeling when you have the desire to cave into your bad habit. There is always a feeling associated with it. Are you lonely, bored, frustrated? Addressing the deeper feeling by doing the appropriate activity to satisfy it allays the craving. For instance, if you're lonely, call a friend. If you're bored, start a creative project or hobby. If you're frustrated, take a walk or meditate. Tip 8. Meditate. Research has shown that meditation is more effective than behavior strategies for healing addictive thoughts. Meditation steers your attention away from your body and back to your right mind. When you come out of meditation, you don't need the bad habit because what you sought in that behavior, peace, comfort, love, you gave to yourself in the stillness. That's why we don't find many meditators struggling with addiction. If you would like to learn to meditate, use the self-hypnosis induction in the section The 3 R's of Reprogramming, Relax, Release, Reprogram. To induce a meditative state, incorporate at least 5 minutes of meditation into your daily routine. Tip 9. Write a Dear John letter. Write a breakup letter to your bad habit or addiction. Include the reasons for breaking up and thank the addiction for the lessons it has taught you or the needs it has tried to meet. Explain that you have better ways now and that you're not the person you were when the habit began. Be gentle. Tip 10. Mark your calendar. Pick a day that feels like the right day to stop your bad habit and mark it boldly on your calendar. It could be today or tomorrow or in 2 weeks. This is a very important day, as important as an anniversary or a birthday. If it's appropriate, tell your friends and family so that you are held accountable. Tip 11. Count the days. Keep track of how many days you have gone without indulging and be proud of yourself for each day. When you've reached a week or a month, reward yourself. Take it day by day, but make 30 days your goal, then another 30 days, and so forth. Tip 12. Forgive yourself when you relapse. I have watched many clients heal their bad habits and addictions, and some of them relapsed at some point in the beginning. Relapse does not have to be a hindrance to healing. It can be a part of your recovery process. I often liken relapse to breakup sex. Sometimes we have to go back to what's familiar in order to realize that we don't want it. We trick ourselves into believing that our old ways will fulfill us as they once did. But we only end up feeling worse. We are held accountable to what we know. If we know we should be making better choices and we don't, we will always pay a price. The blessing in relapse, however, is that it can strengthen our resolve to stay on the right path. Tip 13. Avoid people and situations that trigger you. While in the process of recovery, you are learning that you have strength within you, but you are not yet strong enough. This is a fragile time of rebuilding your self-esteem, so be kind and gentle with yourself. Protect yourself vigilantly against any and all triggers for your bad habit. Write them down and reread them occasionally. It's not unusual for those who are still stuck in their bad habits and unhealthy ways to attempt to sabotage our healing because we are reminders to them of what they are neglecting within themselves. Misery loves company. Keep the company of healthy individuals who are walking the high road. Tip 14. Clean up your environment. This is a continuation of the previous tip. Get rid of anything and everything that reminds you of the addiction or contributes to it. If you are a smoker, for instance, have your car detailed and throw out all cigarettes, ashtrays, and lighters. Delete all sites related to your addiction on your computer. Buy a sage smudge stick and cleanse the energy in your home. Create a safe and healthy environment free from potential downfalls. Tip 15. Talk to someone. Find someone you feel safe enough to talk to about your addiction, a trusted friend or loved one, a family member, counselor, minister, or support group, or even a stranger you meet online in a recovery program. Our secrets hurt us. Addiction is the suppression of yourself and your feelings. Part of the recovery from addiction is learning how to communicate in a healthy way. Practice communicating with your pet if it's scary to communicate with people. Write down your feelings if you're afraid to talk about them. Just practice the art of communication. To love someone is to talk to someone. Tip 16. Make healing your bad habit your goal. Put all other goals aside for 6 weeks and focus on healing your bad habit or addiction. This is the first step along your journey of awakening. All other areas of your life will suffer as long as you are tied to your bad habit, and you will never find what you seek. Tip 17. Do the exercises for this chapter. It takes 30 days for a new habit to replace an old habit, which is why each chapter in Part 2 contains 31 daily reprogramming statements. Using these statements each day will expedite the healing process. The only reason people experience adverse withdrawal symptoms is that they have not changed their subconscious mind. Without changing your core thoughts, you will inevitably fail. And you are not meant to fail. You are meant for greatness.
Okay, so I hope you found that information helpful in some way. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to write me at acourseinwhat@gmail.com, or you can find me on Facebook, facebook.com/Cynthia Morgan Hypnotherapy, or on Twitter at Cynthia S. Morgan. So if you'd like to say the summary of A Course in Miracles with me, that would be great. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God.